Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the Brush Management on the Prairies webinar. My name is Sheila Tyon and I'm a Range Management Extension Specialist with the Ministry of Agriculture out of the Weyburn office, and I will be chairing today's event. Please note this recording is a re-recording of the presentation given on April 15th, 2025. Due to a technical challenge, we were unable to record the original event. Today's presenters are Trevor Lennox and Bonneau, and they will be presenting information on the control of brush encroachment in pastures, and in particular, sharing results from a 3-year brush control project in Saskatchewan. Both Trevor and Andre are range management extension specialists with the Ministry of Agriculture. Trevor covers the Swift Current area, and Andre covers the North Battleford area. Both of them have been with the Ministry of Agriculture for a number of years and have a wealth of experience in range health management. So with that, I will hand things over to Andre to start us off.
Thanks, Sheila. Yeah, like I said, both Trevor and I have been with the ministry for quite some time, and I'm hoping that we can offer some information that we can share with you today. Trevor, go ahead. Yeah, before we start, brush management is not simple. It's not. There's no simple approach to brush management. We have to pace ourselves and we have to think this stuff through. And the other thing too is we don't really want to try and control the brush. We're more concerned with managing it because it's going to be there regardless what we do. In time, it will come back. So just keep that in mind and just kind of guide it to where you want to go. You're never going to win with this stuff. Just try to stay on top of it as best you can. It was really important though, especially with weed or vegetation management in general, do it right the first time. Read the book, read the guide, read the product label, get as much information as you can before you even begin. And like I said, spend the extra time to do it right. I'm finding that people who they try to rush things through, or they try to cheap out a little bit, or maybe cut back on water, cut back on product, you're just going to be doing it again the second time, and it's going to be that much more expensive. Do everything you can to do it right the first time. It's not revenge. Like I said earlier, brush will do what brush will do, and we just try and learn from it and try and use that information to our advantage and give yourself some achievable goals. Sometimes we'll take on a project that's much too large and we're not quite ready for it. Take your time, give yourself some goals, give yourself a certain area to take care of, get it done, learn from that experience, and use that experience that you've learned into your next project. Take your time and do it right and give yourself some achievable goals. On the left, or on the right, sorry, there's the cover of the guide to integrated brush management on the Western Canadian prairies. I believe Sheila put one on the link that you've gotten with the survey. And I think there's also a link to the 2025 Guide to Crop Protection. I should mention that in the Guide to Crop Protection, there's 2 sections in there that are very interesting and very important. One of them is just called Brush Management, and the other one is called Special Weed Problems. If you just open the cover in the book, look at the table of contents right there in the front, it'll give you a couple of pages that are going to be very, very informative for you. Go ahead, Trevor. Why did brush become a problem? Mainly because we got rid of fire and we got rid of the buffalo. Now that's a little extreme, but fire is one of the natural occurrences that the early settlers tried to get rid of as quickly as possible. And of course, at the same time, the bison began to disappear, and we lost a lot of the heavy grazing, and we lost a lot of the fire that, for the most part, for a long time, was what kept the brush at bay. We've lost all of that. So forward, Trevor. Yeah, that was kind of an abrupt end there, but yeah, because we've lost fire and grazing, we've created a brush control problem. And one of those solutions to those problems would be mowing or mechanical damage. The thing about mowing is, first time is not going to be enough. You're going to have to go repeatedly and repeatedly. And if you're going to mow, you have to start thinking about when you're going to do the most damage to that brush. And it's usually when its carbohydrate reserves or its energy reserves are at their lowest. And for the most part, we're going to find that right about the time all the leaves have emerged, but before the flowering began. So once all those leaves have emerged, mowing is probably the best. It is going to do the most damage to it. The problem, of course, with mowing is it's got a heavy cost to it. Takes a lot of fuel, takes a lot of iron. It's heavy stuff. It takes time. Somebody's got to run this tractor. And a lot of times on these pastures, we're working in areas where you can't even access them with a mower. Rock piles, brush piles, just topography, hills. We can't go with a tractor where the cow can go. So we're limited as to how far into the bush or how far into the brush we can get into. And something else I should mention, though, is the cutting height. It's come up more than once in a lot of the research and a lot of the reading that I've done, is that if we cut the twigs too high, if I can call them that, or too low, sorry, there's a risk of cows stepping on them. So I like to say cut them high enough so that the cow can find those stumps or those little twigs with her feet and move her feet around before she puts all her weight on it. So try to cut 6-8 inches high, 10 inches high, whatever you need to, just to make sure those cows can find those stems. Next, Trevor. This is something I use quite a bit. I only have a mile or so of fence, so I'll use a gas trimmer with a blade on the end of it. It's very effective for small jobs. I'll use it to trim under the fence lines, just get rid of that little brush coming up in the wires, and I'll keep myself a trail open that I can go. And it usually takes me 2 or 3 hours every other year or so. Be careful with that blade size. Just talking to the manufacturers and the salespeople, if the blade doesn't fit with the guard, the blade's too big. Get a smaller blade or get a bigger trimmer. There again, only use the larger trimmers. The smaller trimmers tend to have a flexible drive on them. You'll see that the shaft going to the blade or going to the whip has got a curve in it. If it's got a curve in there, it's usually run by a cable of some kind. It's not nearly heavy enough to use a blade on them. Again, I said watch the trim height. If you cut them too short, there's a risk of wrecking or of cows stepping on them and doing some damage. And there again, you're handling a piece of equipment that runs on gasoline that's got a spinning blade on the end of it. PPE is important. Wear your eye protection. Wear something to keep material from hitting you in the face or in the chest if you can. Good boots, because that blade is spinning pretty quick, and believe it or not, it's quite sharp. So just be careful when you're using this thing. Next, Trevor. Bark scrapers. I've got a couple examples here of bark scrapers. Essentially what we're looking at here is something heavy that we're going to drag over the trees, over the shrub and the trees to peel some of that bark off. And Trevor just showed us another one there. The more aggressive, the better. The heavier, the better. The only thing is, though, that bark scrapers, both of these examples, they don't really work on smaller brush. It's got to be the bigger brush. So you're looking at aspen, for example, that are 3-4 inches across type of thing. Something heavy enough, or something thick enough, or I guess heavy enough that you don't have such a heavy a population of stems in there that you're not going to protect those ones at the bottom. You're going to want to go a couple times in 2 or 3 directions just to get as many of those stems as you can. And yeah, all it does really is just peels the bark off of those stems. And when you expose that bark, or you rip off that bark, it disrupts the nutrient flow in those little shrubs or those trees. You disrupt it, you kill it. It's actually fairly easy to kill a tree by doing this. Next, Trevor, I'll show another example here. This is called girdling, and I use this quite a bit. Trees are heavy, of course, when they're full of water. So if you girdle them and let them stand for a while, they'll dry out and die. All right, you're interrupting the nutrient flow in those trees. It's not as quick and as effective as a chainsaw, but if you're out there and you've got an axe or a knife or something where you can scrape that bark off there, just a nice 4 or 5, 6 inch ring pulling off of there, and that tree will be dead within a year. And then, of course, when you do come to knock it down, because you should knock it down, when you come to knock it down, it's going to weigh about half as much as it did before. So it's not going to be as heavy, not going to be as dangerous, and of course, you've got some firewood for the backyard there. Next. Yeah, we're going to hop into herbicides really quickly here, and I think of herbicides as being in 3 general categories. The non-selective herbicides, glyphosate is the perfect example of that. It's going to knock out potentially anything it comes into contact with. So glyphosate is a non-selective. There is very few plants out there who are, well, except for the canolas and some of the other crops out there, not a lot of plants out there, especially weeds and brush, can handle glyphosate application. Then we have the selective non-residuals, which will be your 2,4-Ds, your dicambas, and your metsulfuron methyl, which is escort. Those, they do a really good job on broadleaf plants, but they won't do much on grasses. So, of course, it's become a selective. Because they're non-residual, if you're going to apply these, read the label very carefully, because your brush will have the best time to take up this herbicide. It might be a little bit different with different brushes and different herbicides, but read the label, because your window can be fairly small on your application on brush. And then you get into the selective residuals, which is very much the same as your non-residuals, except they, like the title says, it's going to extend itself, or it's going to last longer in the soil than the non-residuals will. You're going to find on the label of these that you have a much broader application rate, application stage, I should say, mainly because it's a soil residual. It's going to get translocated into that plant. It's going to do a pretty good job of killing it. And of course, it'll keep doing that for up to 5 years in some cases. So you have a much wider window of application. You have a longer timeline of control, but in many cases, the cost is going to be there as well. So take it for what it's worth. The wider the window, the probably more it's going to cost you. And the other thing too is on the label, you're going to see water, water, water. Applying a lot of water with these herbicides is incredibly important, because you need very good coverage. So if the label says 25 gallons an acre, put on 25 gallons an acre, or 25 liters per acre, or whatever the case may be. So go ahead, Trevor. This is just a list of herbicides that's in the Guide to Crop Protection, the newer version. I'm not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time on them, but just to show you a couple things, that there's a lot of common herbicides here, especially the 2,4-D dicamba and the aminopyrrolid and aminocyclopyrrochlor. I also want to mention the glyphosate. Glyphosate isn't always labeled for all the brush. Keep that in mind when you're applying glyphosate, that if something does go wrong, somebody may have an issue with that based on the glyphosate. Probably not, but just keep that in mind, that it may not be labeled for that brush. Next, Trevor. Snowberry. There again, I had a couple on the page earlier. 2,4-D ester amine, dicamba amine ester, escort, aminocyclopyrrochlor, which is your Navius and your True Range, and aminopyrrolid, which is your Restore, Reclaim, Clear, Use Sightline. I wanted to bring this one up because snowberry is probably the most difficult one to deal with on pastures. The others, wolf willow and aspen, they can be an issue, but snowberry seems to be the common issue on most of those pastures. Next. And willow. Up in the north here, especially in the lower areas around PA National Park, where it tends to be a little bit wetter. 2,4-D ester, dicamba and amine, escort, glyphosate, picloram, and aminocyclopyrrochlor. And like I said, this is all in the Guide to Crop Protection. So if you have a certain issue with willow, look it up in the guide, and it'll go into quite a bit of detail there for you. Next. And application options. A couple options here is your wick applicator and your boomless nozzles. On the wick applicator, works really well. I have used it in the past, and I've had really good results. But one thing I should mention, that only glyphosate is registered in a wick applicator. To use any other product is going off label. So just keep that in mind. And the other thing too is that when you're using a wick applicator, if you're not familiar with these, basically you've got a pipe or a tank. It soaks a copper line, or a cotton rope. It'll soak it, and as you pass it over the weeds or over the brush, it'll basically lay out some herbicide onto those leaves. Like I said, it works really well. The only thing that, like I said, a couple issues, and another one is if you're too aggressive, if you put your applicator too low into the canopy, you'll get that too much waving and splashing going on. So instead of just applying it to the brush, you may be spraying it onto your grass underneath as well. So just keep that in mind if you're using a wig applicator. Boomless nozzles are very popular here because, of course, you're out on pastures, it's rough country, you're running into trees, you're running into all things. A boomless nozzle will stay out of the way and still provide quite a bit of water. It's not a pretty spray pattern, but because you're putting a lot of water on, you're getting fairly good coverage with it. Very easy to fix. It's not in the way, works really well. Next, Trevor. And of course, there's aerial applications. I know Lands Branch in the past have used helicopters on some of their pastures in the north here. Works really well. Anecdotally, they'll tell me that because of the rotors, you can get away with less water. Of course, aerial application is using quite a bit less water than you would on the ground. And they're telling me that because of the turbulence created by the rotors, you're going to get a lot better coverage than you would with just a boomless or a boom sprayer. Over on the right, I have a really quick photo of a drone. A drone is licensed to use with Garlon, which is a brush control product. Triclopyr, it used to be what it's called, Remedy. The issue we're having though right now is that no one is licensed to apply herbicides with a drone. In Saskatchewan, we don't have the regulatory capability of doing that just yet. They're working on it, and it should be ready fairly soon, I would think. But for the time being, no one is licensed to operate a drone with herbicides. Like I said, that may change in the near future, but as of right now, today, we can't apply any herbicides with a drone. Next, Trevor. A fire is, well, I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, fire is an excellent way of controlling brush. We've lost fire mainly because we tend to be a lot more of us around. There's a lot more damage that we can do with that fire. So if you're going to use fire, and if you're interested, I recommend you do it. First, get some training and get some experience. There's an organization based out of Saskatoon called Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange. They do a lot of work with fire. They train you. They'll hold your hand and help you out if they need to. Get a hold of them, and they'll be happy to help you out. One of the things about fire, of course, is that we don't have a lot of experience with fire because we haven't used it a lot. And so we're a little bit green when it comes to fire. But the people at the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange will do everything they can to help you out with that. Next, Trevor. Grazing is a little bit tricky. It's going to depend an awful lot on what you're grazing and what animal is out there. We know that sheep and goats do a pretty good job on buckbrush. I've seen sheep strip bark off of aspen trees, if you want to go that way. But mainly we're looking at mechanical damage here. Like I said, cattle will eat the leaves off of aspen trees, whether they like it or not, I don't know. And it will do some defoliation damage, but I think for the most part, the damage you're getting from livestock would be from goats and sheep, and would be stripping that bark. If you're using cattle, get them to congregate and do some hoof damage on those stems. So you're looking at salt blocks, mineral tubs, watering systems, portable watering systems, that type of thing, just so we get some extra traffic in some of those areas. I've got virtual fencing popped in there. I'm working on a project in the St. Walburg area where we're using virtual fencing on cattle. So far, it works really well. I'm hoping that this year we can try to focus animal numbers onto problem areas, whether it's weeds or whether it's brush or whatever we want to get on top of. We're hoping that we can get virtual fencing to congregate those animals and to do damage in those areas. So watch and wait, and hopefully we'll have something for you for next spring. Next, Trevor. A little bit of ID stuff. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think most of us know what poplar and balsam look like. They're closely related trees. The big difference is the color and the shininess of the leaves, or the shape and the shininess of the leaves. Balsam tends to like wetter areas more than poplar does, but in either case, they're fairly similar. The one thing that some people will say is that something actually eats an aspen, but almost nothing will eat balsam. So keep that in mind. If you're going to try and graze balsam, you're going to need a special animal there. Next. Yeah, mowing should be done early in suckering. Of course, when you cut an aspen tree down or you do some brush clearing, all the stems or all the suckers are going to come up. So if you do have that issue, you're going to get on them early enough. You basically want to overgraze this stuff with a mower if you're going to go that route. Follow up with a herbicide. It will increase the effectiveness. And without knowing a whole heck of a lot about it, I suspect we're going to do some damage to the mother trees if they're not cut down already. So if you do go in and spray something like a glyphosate on brush, on aspen brush, you may be doing some damage to the mother, which if that's what you want, that's what you got. It works fine. Bark scraping works great on aspen. I do quite a bit of it myself for firewood. Like I said, it works really well. For firewood, yeah, for damage on the brush. Sorry, I kind of got lost there. If you're going to do some damage on the bark, it does a really good job. Next, Trevor. Silver willow, wolf willow, very common out there. Very beautiful little plant. It can be a problem on pasture, especially if it forms a barrier of some kind. If you look at that photo on the left or on the right, sorry, there's not a lot of animals that are going to push in there unless they absolutely want to. Next, Trevor. But on pasture, we normally see this, and this I would say is not bad. And the reason I say it's not bad is, of course, if Trevor advances to the next slide, wolf willow is a nitrogen fixing shrub. And on pasture, nitrogen is like gold. If you have any source of free nitrogen to put on those pastures, especially a tame pasture, I would probably not go after silver willow or wolf willow unless, like I said, it forms physical barriers. If it's not a barrier, I would say leave it alone as much as you can. It may not be economically feasible to control. I remember seeing some work done of Alberta where they're finding that the cost of taking out wolf willow is more than the loss of leaving that nitrogen fixing plant in there. So take that for what it's worth, but if you don't have to, don't do it. Next. And of course, the bane to all of our existence is buckbrush and snowberry. Pink flowers, small, fleshy white berries. The one thing about snowberry that everyone will notice is that, and I use this a lot, all of the stems, all of the leaves, everything is paired off. So it goes up and down the stem, and every time you have one leaf going on one side, right across from it, you'll have another. So especially when it's defoliated in the fall or in the spring before it flowers out or leaves out, you're going to find all of those little stems pairing up all the way up the main stem. Very easy to pick out. And it's usually very short. Very rarely does it grow much more than 3 feet tall. Next. And here again, it says the most susceptible after the 6-leaf stage. I would say that if you can get a mower into it, if you can get some action onto it, you're probably okay. Right after the leaf, right after it leaves out. So you're looking at early June to early July. Some years it'll be late May, but yeah, keep that in mind that early June or early July, if you got buckbrush and snowberry to deal with, you're probably going to be out busy in that time of year. Yeah, after that point, it starts to build up reserves. And then, of course, it stores up that energy, and then the regrowth on it would be really quick. I remember reading somewhere that you're much better off doing it in the spring, June or July, rather than the fall, mainly because if you go in the fall and all that energy is built up in there, you go and mow it, and it's going to come back twice as aggressive as it was before. So use it, go in and do some damage to it while it's at its weakest, and then leave it alone until the rest of the year until you're ready to deal with it again. I think that's my last slide, Trevor, and I'll let you take over. Oh, sorry, I had one more. Buckbrush isn't very palatable to cattle, but sheep and goats will chew on it. And cattle, it is a barrier to grazing. But I have heard in some cases where, especially if you get an early snowfall, it will form a little bit of a pillow of air between the brush and the grass underneath. So the cattle will kind of be able to dig around in there. But for the most part, it turns into a barrier to grazing. Like I said, with aspen and grazing with cattle, salt blocks, mineral tubs, and water, to help those animals congregate in those areas will do quite a bit of damage. In a lot of cases, it's probably the easiest way to go. So, okay, next. Okay, now I'll switch it over to Trevor.
Okay, thanks, Andre. So Andre is giving you an overview of brush management or trying to control brush. Some examples for Saskatchewan. I guess I'm just going to narrow down a little bit into a specific project that several of our ministry staff did in over 3 years in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So it was a kind of a province-wide project with 6 sites across the province, and we recognize that those species at each site are going to change from one location to another. Going from south to north, you're going to get different brush species that are problems for you. We also tried to have larger acre plots as well, so it wasn't small plots, but 20 to 30 or 20 to 80 acre plots. You can see by those 2 pictures there, just an example. Those are actually pictures from the project I was directly involved in at the Shamrock pasture. And a lot of times you don't even think or recognize that there might be a brush challenge on some parts of pastures, and even the patrons at this particular pasture are actually coming to me asking about brush management because they recognize these plants were out there growing and taking quite a bit of resources from the grass. So there were 6 sites. I'm just going to talk today about 4 sites because of the challenge we have with time getting through this webinar within 1 hour. The first site is the up in northeast part of the province, Nipawin area. It was a project looking at using mechanical control of brush regrowth in a former tame pasture using a large aerator type of machine. And the idea was that this aerator would go over and then they're going to follow it by intensive grazing. Just to show you an example of the landscape in that area. So this is the control area where actually no treatment was done. But you can see the primary species there would be willow, dwarf birch, and some poplar trees. Probably a fairly high water table in that area as well. Just the bottom picture there shows you an example of what the piece of machinery looked like. That's not actually taken on location at the site. That's actually on a different site, but shows the type of machine. And the treatments on the pasture that we did there occurred in the spring after brush species have fully leafed out. Just to show you an example of what the process looked like the day that treatment was done. So the machine was pulled across the landscape. You can see the back, the 2 drums and the paddles on there. Those paddles did a fair bit of shearing as well of the brush species as well. Going out later that summer, you can see the damage that was done. Brush species are laid over. A good portion of them appeared dead on the top growth. You can see just a close-up there of the actual damage on the stems there, the actual chopping off as well with those paddles. And then that picture on the right just showing a picture of the areas that was treated versus the non-treated areas. So appeared to have pretty good impact from the mechanical control. The challenge with it though, going back the year after, is those shrubs really regrew quickly. And unfortunately, the intention was to get some high intensive grazing happening after this treatment happened, but that didn't occur. So they didn't get the integrated control there like they intended on. And as a result, the conclusion was, that because all the regrowth come back, there really wasn't a huge lot of long-term success with the project. Ideally, it should have been integrated with something else, whether that was the heavier, grazing that they initially intended, or probably trying to integrate it with some chemical control as well, or herbicide options. So moving south, this is a project on the southeast, on the east central part of the province, just south of Humboldt on a pasture called Wolverine pasture. So looking at 2 herbicide options to control aspen or white poplar, and 3 herbicide options to control western snowberry, which is sometimes referred to as buckbrush. Just an example picture of this site. You can see on the top there is the aspen plots, and then across the middle there going east to west was a grid road that ran through the center of the pasture. And then south of that grid road was the plots where the snowberry were. These plots were all sprayed the same day, June 10th of 2019. So that's the first year of the project. They were sprayed on June 10th. The treatments that were sprayed So on the snowberry, there was 3 different treatments. The first being Novius there, Reclaim 2, and 2,4-D. I'm just going to mention as well, the 2,4-D used here was 2,4-D only, whereas the other 2,4-D treatments on the other sites were a mixture of 2,4-D and dicamba. The aspen plots had the first treatment was a 1 pass, which is a combination of Reclaim 2 plus Grazon XC. And then the second treatment on the aspen was the Novius. So the question we quite often get is, so these are some options, but what type of a approximate cost would we be looking at these treatment options? I've tried to put this into cost as of today in 2025. Again, these are ballpark approximate costs just for the chemical only. So, but you can recognize that here, obviously the cheapest option was the 2,4-D, about $20 an acre. And then once you get into the residual chemicals, the Novius, Reclaim on the snowberry, your cost does go up. And then I guess once you take that next step into actually controlling those big mature trees such as aspen, that's again probably another step up again in cost. So that's you just got a lot more. Yeah, it's a different type of a control you're looking for there in those taller trees. So this is the fall after the project was started. So this is the control. There was no treatment applied on the aspen here. This is what the aspen site looked like on August 30th of 2019 with no treatment. This is that same time period, August 30th. This is the 1 pass in the fall of the year that the chemical was applied. So pretty good control overall. And this is that same plot 2 years later. So in the 3rd year of the project in 2021. Again, still very good residual control. Of note as well is the grass growth as well, right? So once you remove that canopy, the brush has, it's an incredible canopy. It filters out the light and also competes for nutrients with the grass below. So once you open that up, there is quite a grass response. This was the Novius treatment in the fall of the 1st year after the chemicals applied. So not quite as good of control at this particular site with this product. And this is 2 years later then, so in the 3rd year of the project. Definitely lots of control given. You can see the areas where the brush was controlled, but there was still some green leaf remaining on some of the trees. Just a visual identification from a graph perspective or chart perspective. So here's your control where no treatment was done, and the dark column being the fall of 2019, and then the lighter color being it would have been the summer of 2021, so 2 years later. So you can see that the Novius treatment gave about, reduced live stems by about half approximately, and maintained that through over the 2 years, or I guess 3 years of the project. 2 years later was when this monitoring was done. The 1 pass gave obviously the best results on this particular site, and that control lasted pretty good as well. You can see into that 3rd year. So across the road at that same location, just across that gravel road, was the snowberry site. So you can see snowberry was the primary target. The second picture there shows more snowberry in it, but there was quite a bit of wolf willow or silver willow as well. So this is in the fall of the 1st year, and this is with no treatment. And then this is the fall on the plots so the 1st year of the treatment. So you can see the Reclaim showed good results that follow that 1st year. Here's the Novius, and here's the 2,4-D. So obviously quite a bit more green growth on the shrubs there in the 2,4-D treatment. So we did not get the control we would have liked probably with the 2,4-D option at the site. This is showing the last year of the project. This is what the Reclaim looked like. So you can see very good control on your brush as a whole there, but you do see some small green stems starting to come up down low, coming back from the roots. So obviously the reclaimed chemical is starting to wear off. The Novius, again, provided really good control, but you can see that there's some new shoots coming back, from the base, the end of that project. That's the third year of the project. But compared to 2,4-D, 2,4-D did not have that residual activity in the second and third year. So we had significant regrowth happening on those areas. You see lots of regrowth here, but still those numbers, when you look at the chart, were still, half, way less than half even of what they would have been if there's no control at all, right? So although 2,4-D didn't give as good a control, still really reduced the density of those plants as well. This chart just shows here over here on the right is the control. So this would be the snowberry, the first year, and then the final year, and the orange here is the wolf willow counts. So if you look at the wolf willow and then look at all the other treatments, pretty much wolf willow was taken out pretty much completely at this site with both treatment options. As a whole, wolf willow is a lot easier shrub to control, whereas you still have more variation in results with the snowberry. So obviously a lot of regrowth came back on the snowberry from what we initially saw that first year. Whereas the reclaim, the first year actually we had basically no plants coming back that first year. Whereas that third year there was just starting to be a few. So obviously reclaim got the best overall control at this site on the snowberry in particular. So conclusions: aerial application of 1 pass gave excellent results of a 25-year-old aspen stand. Aerial application of Novius and reclaim were effective at controlling western snowberry into the second and third year. But 2,4-D was effective at controlling wolf willow, but not a great option for western snowberry. Moving over to the west side of the province, a project that was done by over near the Kerrobert area, primarily focused on western snowberry. This site was a mix of wolf willow and snowberry, but you can see snowberry was the main target that we're going after. This particular site, they actually applied a mowing treatment as well. So in the first year of the project, so it was a 3-year project, that first year was strictly, they just went in and mowed one plot. And then the second year is when they went in and did their chemical treatments. And then the third year was just a monitoring year. So you can see the area here that was been mowed. Again, they tried to leave the stems, in that 8 inches tall range, trying to minimize hoof damage. The mowing was done that first year in September. Ideally, that would have been timed better probably for August is when they tried to do that. And then that particular plot then was sprayed the second year with 2,4-D and dicamba on July 5th. So note that plot that was mowed actually was sprayed that second year 1 week earlier than the other plots. These plots were all sprayed July 13th. So that 1 week, I think, did give it an advantage as well for even chemical control as well. So ideally, they would have targeted spraying probably for all these plots as to be done in June, but unfortunately, because of timing with the contractor, etc., that did not get done till July. This is what it looked like with no chemical in the final year of the project. This is, you can see the reclaim on the right hand side here. Pretty good control. This is at the final year of the project versus no control over here on the left. This is the 2,4-D dicamba treatment with no mowing. So just strictly a 2,4-D dicamba treatment. So appears pretty good. So this is the final year of the project, which would have been the second year after the chemical. But you do see some new growth coming back from the base of those stems. So new shoots starting to come back because of the minimal residual activity with that product. Here's where they mowed the first year. and then went back in that second year and did the spraying with 2,4-D and dicamba. This plot actually had the best overall results because of that integrated approach on brush management. Kind of a busy table, but just shows you, this over on the far right is the control. So what stem densities were on this plot. If you look, you're in the 70 to 80 live stems per square meter. So if you think of that in terms of a density of plants, think of the amount of moisture and nutrients these plants are taking from your pastures. A lot of competition there. So the best overall control was the mowing initially, and the 2,4-D dicamba in the very end gave the lowest numbers. You can see these numbers are actually cumulative shrubs components. So the gray is the snowberry, the pink is the rose, and the green is the wolf willow. So over on the left here is the more residual products, the reclaim and the novice here. So as you can see, stem densities were reduced basically on all treatments. But interesting to note that actually that mowing plus the 2,4-D the second year gave them overall best control on the snowberry. For Western snowberry control, reclaim was probably the most effective, but they all were very close for providing decent control in this project site. A single mowing of Western snowberry was not effective. You had to do so. It definitely reduced the stem density some, but it wasn't enough to have huge significant benefit. You needed that follow-up chemical treatment that second year to get any significant benefit from that mowing treatment, is what we found. So the mowing is extra work, but seemed to improve control. It also helped improve the animal movement in those areas as well. A lot of times you don't recognize how much the brush actually acts as a barrier, or even those dead stems can act as a barrier to animals moving into those areas. So the mowing helped open that canopy up a lot as well. So the last site I'm going to talk about here is the Shamrock pasture, just near the community of Shamrock. This is the project that's more dear and near to my heart in the sense that I was directly involved at this site. So looking at chemical control of Western snowberry and wolf willow on an old tame pasture dominated by crested wheatgrass and Kentucky bluegrass. We looked at two treatments. So the first one being a residual product, Reclaim 2, which is more of a true brush type product. And the 2,4-D ester plus dicamba. So again, that would be more of a non-residual product. There would be some residual activity in that first year you apply it, but would not last, for very any length of time, and definitely wouldn't carry over into the next year. With these products, higher water volume is recommended when you're applying to brush products, application. You want to get good coverage. 20 is the recommended, as you can see, because of the application equipment we're using a high clearance sprayer. We're a little shy on our actual water volume we needed to get out there, but we still have pretty good overall control. Again, the question comes up is cost. Just to compare these two products, what they would cost probably in today's value. Again, these are ballpark costs for 2025, what the chemical would cost. They're about $59 an acre for the Reclaim 2, whereas the 2,4-D dicamba is probably in around the $50 per acre range. So I guess the point I'm trying to get across here is quite often people, they'll go out and use a 2,4-D option to try and control their brush, thinking it's cheaper. But when you follow the label and go by the recommended rates, they're high rates. And if you follow the label as well, quite often it recommends a dicamba to be added as well when you're going after snowberry. So when you put that all together, your cost gets pretty significant. So in the end, you're probably better off going with the true brush product and having that residual product last longer for you as well. Just showing an example of the application day. Spraying was done that first year of the project, July 11th. Ideally, we would have probably liked spraying to have been done earlier on the average type of year you have. Probably June is probably a better window. But this particular year actually was delayed. Just plant growth was delayed this year because of the cool type of spring it was. And you can see the snowberry was just, flowering at that time. So probably staging wise on this particular year it was okay. We had good results. So if you would have went out to those plots after they were sprayed in the fall of that year, you would have seen equal control. You know, you would have said all the brush species appear dead on the areas that were sprayed. But going out the year after, so the second year of the project in July, we did some plant counts. And this is the snowberry, and this was we call a thick snowberry area. You can see that it's all come back. These are all new shoots that have come back here. Yes, the old stems are still in amongst there, but they're dead. But these are all new shoots. So that first year, so prior to chemical application, there was 34 stems in these thick areas. That second year went out there to do plant counts, which is this picture showing you here. There's approximately an average of about 18 stems per half meter by half meter quadrat in size, half meter by half meter. And they were all new stems coming back. So the 2,4-D dicamba done its job, but there wasn't any residual activity there to continue to target the roots. This is a thin stand, so I also want to look at some areas that were more thinner. So you've got a lot more grass growth, but you still got that snowberry component there. So these areas had 5 stems per half meter by half meter quadrat. Now that second year we're down to 1, and that third year down to about 1 as well. Interesting that this 1 stem was the new stem that come back from the root. So reclaim 2 on snowberry. This is the residual product. So going back there to these plots, looking at the stem density. So we took the stem densities of those thick snowberry stands from about 34 stems per half meter by half meter quadrat, and really reduced them down to about 4 and even to 2 about that third year there. Those thin snowberry stands where you still had a lot of grass still growing yet in those areas, but still snowberry was a component of the landscape. Taking those stems from about 16 stems per half meter by half meter quadrat down to about 3 and even into 2 in that third year. So really reducing the stem density, but also as well, that bottom bullet there is just we also reduced the stem height as well. So you knew the vigor was really compromised of these plants. So stem height was approximately about half of what the control area were, where there was no treatment. So the project ended in 2021. That was the third year of the project. I went back 2 years later in the fall, so in 2023, just to take a look and see kind of what the lasting impact from that reclaim treatment was. And still the plots are very, very clean yet. This is actually the day I was picking up the grazing cages that were out in the landscape there. So wolf willow. So this is wolf willow the second year after the application. You can see wolf willow still very dead. And here's the third year after the project. Wolf willow still very dead. So no wolf willow came back from the chemical treatments. But interesting to note that you can see the snowberry even the second year and third year coming back in here. So that's the challenge with snowberry. It just has that more of that will to live, you might say, and wants to come back from those roots. Conclusions from this particular site: Reclaim True provided very effective treatment and probably the best overall, from a cost perspective, the best overall economic benefit as well. The 2,4-D dicamba treatment provided control for snowberry that first year, but that control did not carry over into the second and third years. Wolf willow, the project demonstrated that both products, the Reclaim 2 and the 2,4-D dicamba, were both effective at wolf willow, as they're just essentially we saw absolutely no regrowth on these areas where the chemicals applied of the wolf willow. Final conclusions of the whole project across the province, across all of our sites. Wolf willow by far was the easiest shrub to control, while western snowberry and aspen are more difficult to control due to that extreme underground root system. Herbicides designed for brush control do pay off. It's important if you're going for brush to select those products that are more designed for brush in mind. The residual control is very helpful, especially when you're controlling species like snowberry. And important to use that proper water volume as well to get the good leaf coverage. And if the product is recommending a surfactant to be included as well, make sure you use that surfactant to get the type of control you're looking for. Brush control does not last forever. You need to keep at it. As this project suggests, there's an integrated approach is probably the better approach in the long term, trying to keep a combination of different strategies. But yeah, just keeping on it, and you can't just do a one-shot application and walk away, because it will come back on you eventually. With that, we'll open up for questions for myself or Andre.
Thank you, Trevor and Andre, for that informative presentation. We'll now move into a question and answer session, and we'll review the same questions from our live event. So our first question, and this can be directed to either Andre or Trevor. What timing window would you recommend between mowing and herbicide application?
I can take that one. Yeah, after a mow, you basically want to wait for everything to leaf out before you give it a shot, because, well, it's got to be absorbed and translocated. So a healthy growing, if there's enough there to pick up your herbicide and translocate it down, you're probably in a good spot. I would also look at whatever guides you use, whether it's a guided crop protection or anything else. It'll be on the label if you're going to be mowing, or it should be on the label if you're going to be mowing and then applying a herbicide. Recommendations will be in there. But generally, yeah, you want to wait till there's enough leaf material there to pick up your herbicide and to translocate it down into the roots.
Yeah, and I think just the advantage of the integrated approach as well too, if you can even do it a couple different options, maybe not the same year, but maybe every,
Yeah, normally we're talking about, mowing in the spring, and then if you get a really good regrowth late summer, early fall, you could probably give it a shot. But usually, in my experience, wait a year or so, and then let it get a good flush out, and then give it a shot of herbicide. And that's usually, I find that's the best way to do it. But there again, your experience will tell you whether it works or not. But yeah, as long as it's actively growing and the timing is right, you will get a good kill.
Okay, great. Thanks for that answer. Second question here. Does the ministry have plans for more trials in the near future?
Trevor, go ahead with that one.
Yeah, I think we're always looking for feedback and comments. I think at this point, kind of the reason this project was initiated right at the start was this whole brush control is a kind of a wide arena that there isn't a lot of people working in. There isn't a lot of working knowledge to share out. I mean, obviously, the retailers, the people that design and manufacture the herbicides, they know their product, but there really wasn't much uptake and demonstration or getting it out in the landscape, to show people these tools as another option, right? And we're not here to push herbicides. There's other options out there as well, but herbicides can be a very effective, option in your toolbox. Some of these herbicides have come more on mainstream in the last, 5-10 years that we didn't have 20 years ago, right? So we have more options available now. I think it's worthwhile just demonstrating that. In Andre and myself, our situation is we spend a lot of time this summer out on the landscape, and we're seeing things, and we get into some areas where brush is very thick and there's very little grass growth in some of these areas. So opening that canopy up and getting some more grass growing, even from a rangeland conservation perspective, if we continue to walk away from some of these tools that have been used in the past, which was, grazing and fire, we have to start looking at other options to try and control this brush, because it will continue to expand. And we know in some parts where once brush expands into an area, you lose a lot of your native grass species. And actually, in some situations, it's very prone then to invasion by things like Kentucky bluegrass, etc. So you essentially lose a lot of your actual true native rangeland then. So.
Great, thanks, Trevor. And another question has come in. How effective would you rate some of the bark scraping implements compared to mowing on moderate to large brush?
Yeah, I think you're looking at two stages or two types of brush here. The bark scraping from the PFRA in Alberta Agriculture, that is mainly for the larger aspen, essentially. Maybe some willows, but mainly the larger aspen. You're looking at a brush or trees or a brush that is big enough to actually get a lot of damage from that from the scrapers. If you're looking at smaller stuff like snowberry, wolf willow, smaller aspen, and whatever the case may be, you're probably looking at a mower rather than bark scraping, just because a bark scraper will just kind of ride over top of the surface on these things, and it won't really do the bark damage that you would like. So yeah, on smaller stuff, I would probably go with a mower, and on the larger ones where you're getting above 6 feet tall, then go in with the bark scraper and go to town with that.
And Andre, I know we were chatting earlier, and you had mentioned how right angles can work well. Do you want to comment on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I mentioned it in the presentation here, but yeah, you're going to want to hit that brush at different angles, just to get it to lie in different directions and get as much scraping done as you can. Um, just usually, they talk about when you run over it the first time, everything's lying down in one direction. One direction. Sometimes you can't do it right away because it's all laying in the wrong direction. So you come back where it starts to stand up a little bit, and then hit it at a right angle, and hopefully you'll get a lot more on your second pass. But you're not doing it the same day. You'll be doing it one day, and then it could be a couple of weeks later, a month later, depending on how aggressive you were the first time. You might have to wait for it to stand up a little bit better before you hit it again with the scrapers.
Well, I think that's all the time we have today. I'd like to thank Trevor and Andre for all the great information that they've shared with us. And thank you for taking time to join us for this re-recording today. If you have questions regarding brush control management or any other farming related questions, please contact your local Saskag regional office or contact the Agriculture Knowledge Center at 1-866-457-2377, and they will put you in contact with a specialist to help answer your questions. Again, thank you for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.